o runga kia tau te Māori o raro, pai heretia te ture Waihoro, pai heretia te ture tangata, hei pau arihi ia tātou i tēnei wā, kia tika te whakaaro, kia tika te kupu, ti hei Māori ora. Manu tiria, manu werohia ki te poho te raka, katou re re re, katou mai te ruhi, e tau e koia. Koia, koia, ko tararauriki ki mai maui, e hara i te whitu me te waru e tau e koia. Koia. Oh, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai. Welcome everybody to the Waihoro Spreydon-Cashmere-Heathcote Community Board meeting, information session, Thursday, 26th of September. Just a few items of housekeeping to run through before we begin. Just noting to everyone that the meeting's being live streamed. So the meeting's being recorded from the camera up there to your right. It just captures basically everyone who's sitting at the board table, and the recording is put up on YouTube. For that reason, just to ensure we've got good sound quality and so that everyone can hear you, I'd ask everyone just to make sure that when you're speaking that your microphone's turned on, and you'll be able to tell that it's turned on when it's green. There's a button on the right will turn it on and off, and you can sort of hear the difference when it's not pointed at my mouth when I'm speaking. So we'll kick off with a round of introductions. My name's Callum Ward. I'm a board member for Spreydon and the board chair. We'll go clockwise around the room. I think we get everyone that way.
Jonathan Jones, I'm the community board advisor.
Kia ora, Melanie Coker, City Councillor for Spreydon Ward.
Kia ora, Keir Leslie, Community Board Member for Cashmere.
Tēnā koutou katoa na mahi nui kia koutou ko Sarah Templeton Aho, and I'm the councillor for Heathcote.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Lee Sampson. I'm a Community Board Member based in Cashmere.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Hall, Community Board Member for Heathcote.
Kia ora everyone. Roy Kennelly, Community Board Member for Spreydon.
Kia ora, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Tim Scandred, and I'm the Councillor for the Cashmere Board.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone. We've received apologies as well from Tim Lindley, so we don't have to move and second that. Not a formal meeting. So now we're going into open forum. So this is the part of the meeting where members of the public can come speak to the board about any issue that pertains to the board. So we've got Brian Trelevin, and it looks like there might be a few more. Is Brian here? Cool. You've come to speak to us about the Christchurch Yacht Club design. And I think excellent. So we've got your slides up on the screen there, and we've got copies as well in front of us on our devices too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, my name's Brian Trelevin. A wee bit of background about me. I'm president of the Christchurch Yacht Club. I'm a past president of Yachting New Zealand. I'm an Olympian and international sailor. I have a deep background knowledge of requirements of yacht clubs right throughout New Zealand, of the facilities they need, and also internationally. My business career, I had my own business, Trelevin Rigging, which had quite a strong element in it of construction. Following my retirement, first time, I joined Fletcher Construction and worked with Fletcher Construction in the earthquake recovery. So I have a construction background. I'd like to introduce Paul Williams, who will be with me presenting this. Paul is a co-founder of Armitage Williams, one of our leading construction companies in Christchurch and Canterbury. He's a past chairman of the board, recently retired, and spending his time working with me on Christchurch Yacht Club's affairs. So we will present this. Enough of the preamble. I'd like to go straight into the presentation, which is a very short PowerPoint. I'll talk lightly about it. We don't want repetition. We're on a tight time frame, and Jason from CCC will be presenting some. Hopefully, you've all read the presentation in detail, so I will push over that relatively quickly. So thank you, JJ. Next slide. Can we have the lights dimmed so we can actually see the images, please? Right, you all know where the Christchurch Yacht Club is. I have I've got a array machine working. See over here, there's the clubhouse. On the right is the area that we're talking about, and we refer to it as the west side of the clubhouse. You can see yachts being rigged over here in the area, and we have, of course, the floating pontoon. Next one, JJ, thank you. That's obviously in front of the clubhouse, looking at part of the rigging area. It's just to bring you up to where we are with it, to familiarise you with it. Next slide, please. That is where we launch our patrol boats at the moment, and we keep them inside the clubhouse behind those red doors. And we launch from there. It's a very steep ramp of which we're going to forego with this new proposal. But that's what we're doing at the moment. Now that one, the white building is the existing clubhouse. That's not a reconfiguration. It's simply an illustration of where the clubhouse is. On the right, we have the patrol boats in behind these two big doors. And the next one over, those three, are for junior yachts, club-owned yachts being stored there. We need them there because they're juniors, and we need them right beside the control of the clubhouse. Next slide, please. That's a close-up of the very same thing with the two big doors, patrol boat, and we would anticipate rigging here. A new concourse here that is being extended. I'll show you that in another graphic so that the boats will come in and launch here. Next slide, please. That's the same sheds viewed from the clubhouse looking westward, which is towards Redcliffe. An illustration again. That is approaching it from Redcliffe's driving past. So that's what people driving past would view. This is obviously the new building there. That is an elevation or a cross-section of what the sheds will have in them. The patrol boats, they're about 5 metres or whatever, 6 metres. The depth of the shed is about just under 7, thereabouts. And you will see, very importantly, this is a key to the whole thing. We are very, very conscious of neighbours and blocking views. From there to the top of the shed is about 2.5 metres, which is only 500, that much above a 2-metre fence, which neighbours over the road are allowed to erect outside their property. And we're on this side of the road and we're only at 2.5. So we're very conscious of the neighbours' reaction. And this, of course, just an illustration where we launch. Next one, please. That's another view. Again, on the right-hand side, a vehicle driving past and somebody walking past. The left-hand side is part of our title. Next slide, please. Again, that's another illustration. Next slide. That is probably the key to the whole thing for the neighbours. If you're on the other side of the road looking north, that's effectively what you would see. Just come back to that, JJ, please. We're very conscious of the finish on the building, that we're anticipating the same stone as on the walkway further along, the very low walls. We're anticipating, without commitment, we're thinking along the lines of a similar finish on the block building to make it look in keeping with the rest of the walkway. And we have a gate there because that's needed. Next slide. I won't go into detail. You've all got copies of this. That is the existing site. Now, that one is very important. An illustration of back here, we're extending, we have a small area where we launch onto the floating pontoon, a small area. We're extending the gabion basket wall, which is under that, extending it along and returning it back. It's to create, and we will backfill behind that to create a concourse to bring our rigging area over to that side of the building to relieve pressure of rigging over here. We have a very important area over here that is underused because we can't use it, all within our title. So there we are there. So next slide. That one, you can see what I was talking about. See over here, that's there. We're extending that out. We're going about 4 metres past this dilapidated jetty, 4 metres past and returning it. And we're extending that slipway a touch over here. So we're not foregoing slipway in going back to our boundary. And then we'll have to extend it out. And we have to keep the gradient at an acceptable level for kids to pull their boats up on. So thank you. So now, rather than anything else, I'd like Paul to add niceties to what I've said for you. Yeah.
Brian, just to reflect.
Speaker.
Thanks, Brian.
Green button.
Paul Williams, couple of points. The timber deck, Brian, you might point that out, that's there at the moment is not used at all, I don't believe, by the club because of health and safety risks. And that's what's driven us to be planning or proposing a gabion and solid hard-filled area to there. The gabion baskets are the method that the council used to retain the wall to the east of that blue line when they did the development of the public car park through to there. And so that's what's driving us engineering wise, because the flow of that channel through there always tends to scour out any of the ramps, the piles in that position. So we think if it's an engineered structure, that's just to explain the deck, replacement of the deck. And then the ramps to the west of that, just above that writing where it says lead plug, that is proposed so we can get an easier gradient for the younger sailors to be wheeling in their launch trolleys. Just safety all round again, really. Brian, is there any other aspects of that design?
How conscious we are, Paul, of the community and the club's interest in serving the community.
Yeah, just talk about that. And in the notes, I wrote this historical reflection. And again, just to explain, how people like myself and some of the representatives from the club sitting with us here in the public gallery. My son was 10 when he started yachting down at the Christchurch Yacht Club. I always knew it had a strong reputation in the Redcliffs area, but it's really well known throughout Christchurch. And I'm not a person that resided in that area, but was driven to joining the club through its reputation. And as I've explained, it's been running continuously since 1891, massive history. And it's managed to survive year in, year out. But Brian and I and a couple of others working outside our yacht club committee felt that, I guess as custodians or patrons, we felt a personal responsibility to assist the club with enhancing the facilities that are there or maintaining them, because they have got to a point where they are dangerous, structurally unsound, and at the end of the day, the club would be in a precarious position if its facilities weren't up to date and modern and safe. And that's why we started looking at forward planning. The clubhouse would be very nice to replace, but it's not essential. We both felt that if we start with improving facilities for younger sailors and launch boat facilities, then you can rebuild the foundation of the club popularity, enhance the membership, because the facilities have been approved. So we felt that by starting in the west and replacing and rebuilding the launch and the rigging facilities was paramount. We've also been cognizant in recent years of the rising sea level, and I bound to say that I think in the development of the club, whilst we love that historic shape and will be striving, probably our personal feelings coming out here, to have a club that's very similar looking, I think it's bound to be single story rather than two-story. There's just not going to be at the moment, the high tide would almost, or does come into the buildings that are on the ground floor. So looking ahead, I think planning wise, it would be a single story, and that's driven us to relocating the launch boats, the rescue boats at least, and the launching of the junior sailors, these buildings to the west side. So they won't be part of the clubhouse. Clubhouse would be a meeting room, toilets, change rooms, that type of thing.
Gotcha.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. I wonder if we could just have the lights back on and there's time for questions if the board's got any quick question from Lee. Thanks, Ken.
Would you mind? Oh, it was all me. Sorry, that was. You can turn it back on if you want. Can I just check, just clarify, is the notional boundary you see on the outside, is that your lease area at the moment, the greyish line, or?
Yes, it is. And there, it's approximately 56 metres longitudinally and 36 deep on the left-hand side there.
Yeah, okay.
And a little bit shorter here. So
Yeah.
56, it's a it's a very small area for a yacht club to operate from. And most of it is unusable for rigging.
And I'm just clarifying the status of your plans. I presume this is largely a resource consent matter, which is obviously a separate council. Yeah.
Very much so. Yacht clubs, yacht club members are appointed to the committee to run yacht clubs and run yacht races. They're not appointed to be experts in construction. So Paul and I and one other person, Trevor Kite, decided we would have a look. They were talking about a possible rebuild of the clubhouse, and we came to the conclusion that we needed to look at a total package of how are we utilising our land, are we using it effectively? So that then drove us to deal with this that we're talking about, and very much so for the foundations of the building, if and when we deal with that, that would be on solid ground as opposed to piles with water underneath it as it is. So we've looked at the total package and Paul, obviously, we have a deep understanding of the technical difficulties of doing what we're doing in the engineering complex. We are well aware of that, and obviously with Paul's background, we have a good understanding of the reality of the situation. We understand it in total. And yes, building consent, resource consent, we understand that too.
Cool. And last question from Sarah.
Thanks so much. I'm just wondering, have you approached ECAN yet and got an indication of any issues with building out into that marine area?
No, we haven't. It's premature to deal with that issue at the moment. Firstly, we have to have consent to do what we would like to do, and then we've got something we can present to somebody, such as engineers and quantity surveyors and various things. We have to go through a logical step. Rather than engaging people and engineers and saying, can we, would we like to, we want to be very careful how we approach it. All sports clubs in New Zealand are, and I don't know all of them in every sport, obviously, but sports clubs generally don't have any money, right? Simple answer. They have low subs to attract people to play sport, and they don't have money. So a question you may raise, it's in here, financials. We would require total external funding, but unless we've got a proposition to offer people, we can't ask them. So it's pretty simple that way.
And when you say consent, you mean landlord, sort of our community board
Council
as,
consent.
yeah.
I was gonna clarify.
No, consent as an approval to change the lease arrangements or building consent.
Under
But
the license to occupy.
Yeah, so the license to occupy you're talking about.
We have to gain the approval of the landlord for any work on the property.
Yeah, so we're not talking about formal consent
Nope,
as in
not
building and
yet.
resource
Not yet,
consent,
no.
just the actual change of use of the land to
Yes.
do this work. And
Yes.
so that would go through a consultation process that
Mm.
council would fund before you worked out whether it's possible to do the work.
Would have to, there'd be no point in us proceeding with ECAN or the building consent
Yeah.
drawings until we have the approval of the landlord.
Okay, I'm just
it'd be-
process, I mean, for both of us and for the community as well. It would probably be useful if you had some sort of indication from ECAN of what would be required to go through the consent without actually going through the consent itself.
The resource consent.
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
referring
from ECAN building out into that marine area. Because what could happen potentially is that we could go through a ratepayer funder consultation process, do all of the work for that, only to find out that you wouldn't be able to get consent, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And we have the PIM report of which questions have to be answered, which will drive us in
Okay.
that direction. But again, and you'll notice in the notes, Jason from CCC will be reporting later of the license to occupy, as Paul referred to, any building requirements for CCC consent, written consent, and you'll see Jason will mention it, that it's delegated to this community board. And so we're here
That's right. Give us a heads up.
to talk to you about
Yeah,
it.
No,
Have you have you talked to the neighbours yet? I have had communication, as you might expect.
We've been pretty low profile on this,
Yeah.
and even within our members, a lot of our members. Paul and I have been working on this for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
So it's not a fly-by-nighter.
Yeah, I just, I have had a communication from a neighbour concerned about the new section, because currently, while you've got the area, it's permeable with views through, and that would block views. So just a heads up. Yeah. So,
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks for your time, Brian and Paul.
Thank you.
And yeah, well, you appreciate that. I think it's a natural segue into the staff report. So we'll,
Yeah.
appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
So next up, Jason. Is Jason come to speak to us about the application?
Do we stay?
Oh,
at the
yes.
table?
I'll ask you to step back from the table. Yeah, thank you. Apologies. Yeah, should have made that clear.
Kia ora,
Right.
tēnā koutou. My name is Jason Tickner. I am a Parks and Recreation Planner for the Christchurch City Council. And this is
Felix Dawson, property leasing.
Welcome back, Felix.
sorry, I'll just get it up on my computer as well. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter. So yes, we've been approached by the Christchurch Yacht Club around 12 months ago and been in conversation with them regarding their plans and strategic vision to develop their site at the Christchurch Yacht Club in Monks Bay. We, the brief background up there, basically the club's been there for 130 years. The current building, the clubhouse, which currently stores some of their equipment, yachts and patrol boats, is around 85 years old and is deemed a earthquake-prone building. A little bit of history was the club sold the land in around 1971 to council. Council then granted, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Felix, a license or deed of license in perpetuity to the club for the roughly 2,000 square metres of land that they're currently occupying. And the balance of the land, which is the car park next door, was vested and classified as Esplanade Reserve and sits in perpetuity as a reserve to the Christchurch City Council. So fundamentally, the entire land is a Christchurch City Council landholding, but that was just to clarify the separation and the history behind it. And as spoken by Brian, this is basically a first stage while the club sets themselves up ideally to upgrade their club rooms in the future, which are getting near end of life from my visual observation and what the club have informed me. So, and fundamentally, the activity that is proposed is what the site was basically licensed to provide. So basically for the yacht club to carry on their activity. Do you have anything to add, Felix?
No, not really. It's pretty self-explanatory. I think,
Yes, so the site itself, sorry, Jojo, if you could go to the fourth slide there. Like I said, it's roughly 2,000 square metres. Currently has a pontoon that just extends beyond the lease area. That's relatively new in the scheme of the club. And the reserve and car park to the right, which you can see in that photo at the bottom. The photo at the top is obviously as you approach the site, heading out to Sumner, and for context, the area to the left that you can see in that photo is roughly the location of the proposed storage building. If you could flick to the next slide, thank you. So the proposal, I won't get into too much more detail because I think Brian covered it well, but fundamentally what I've done to make it a little bit clearer here is I've highlighted the different areas of the proposal, which are the changes under the lease. So the area in red is the extension to the level concourse. That's a expansion of hard stand area for rigging and general use by the club. The area in blue to the left is the proposed extension to the slipway for launching of boats. And of course in yellow is the proposed rescue boat and junior dinghy storage. Thank you, Jojo. And again, you've seen these, but basically those are the side elevations and profiles and the view from the residents and people using the road in the bottom right there. And I think Brian covered that pretty well. Next slide, please. And again, you've seen these through Brian's presentation, so I won't touch any further unless you have anything to add.
no.
No, thank you. So as we've worked through the matter, we're aware that there are likely to be a number of issues raised. Obviously, the first one is potential opposition to the proposal from directly opposite landowners. The impact on view shafts, and again, that's coming back to the landowners or users of the area and the amenity effects. The one thing we need to be, I suppose, cognizant of is there will be a resource consent process as well that the club will have to go through that will require them to do an assessment of environmental effects, and the discretion which council does talk to the matters of effects on neighbours, is it the right site for the activity, etc., but that is not a matter which is in the realm of what we're speaking today as parks planners. So we'll leave that for the resource consent planners, but and I suppose that goes on to the point that was correctly raised by councillor here, that the chicken and egg matter of resource consents, and it's a tricky one for us because clubs generally can't fundraise without some kind of confirmation that is supported from a leasee or landowner perspective. And we get that quite a bit, or in previous roles have had that quite a bit, of clubs approaching us and us saying, you know, there is a resource consenting requirement, and resource consent is no way definitive or it's guaranteed. So the key is we've made the club aware of that. The club are aware. They've got my understanding that the planner engaged. But yes, it is a tricky one, and it's one that I don't think is, there might be opportunity there to, and I think it was a good suggestion, get some input from ECAN especially, and possibly our own duty planners. But from my initial inspections, There's been a recent rock wall revetment improvement for the coastal pathway that's been consented with ECAN. And there also has been the pontoon built here. So from a very high level, there has been structures consented in that area. Although that is not providing any certainty, it does show that council has approved works in that area. So we've proceeded on the basis of this conversation on that kind of very high level planning assumptions. The other thing that has been raised by the community in previous consultation, so there was talk about a fence going up at one stage about 12 months ago as well. The
This
community
time last year.
and the community made it very clear that they felt that that parcel of land was used by the community for free and open access. It is technically an exclusive use right area, so that the club does have an exclusive right to it, but the public, as you understand, it's open, and you've got swimmers using the pontoons and the ramps. So they felt that a fence may take away from that. This application, although is not closing the site off, it will close the site off from that side of the road, from the west end. So that is another matter we need to be aware of, I suppose, as we're making considerations around this. But the club have made it clear that at this stage they're not planning to close the site from that east end, so from the car park side. But they are looking to improve matters around health and safety where they've got where they're using the club for club days, and there are boats in the water, propellers, kids jumping off pontoons, how they're going to manage that. So they have identified to us as the council that they are having some issues, and they are looking at options to how they manage that without closing off public access at this stage. The next steps, as we see it, will be to continue our mana whenua engagement, which is currently underway, kick off a community engagement piece. We've got our engagement team with a plan prepared for that, subject to everyone thinking that's the best way forward. We think that will probably run from October through November. Then once we've received feedback from the community, we'll be looking to look at what the main themes are, meet again with the club, see what options are around mitigation or changes if they do want to make any changes to their proposal to try to remedy some of those concerns. And then from there, early in the new year, we'll be looking to present an officer report to this community board regarding making a decision in regard to the club's request. And then, of course, following that, there'll be further resource consent, both regional council and city council, followed by building consent. So in no way a short or cheap process that the club are looking to do, but for the future of the club, it seems logical in my perspective. So thank you very much. Anything to add?
No, I think good to hear from the board.
Yeah. Questions from Sarah, then Tim, and then Lee.
Thanks so much. One heads up, ECAN are consulting on a new coastal policy statement. I think with the National Coastal Policy Statement, and then the regional policy stuff is being redone. So that might.
What's the time frame?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, it was supposed to be 3 years ago. So
So
as these things go, but I've heard talk about it again recently. So I don't know what the draft is looking like there, but that might have an impact. The other one is that back when the coastal pathway in this area was being consulted on many years ago, part of that consultation involved the site and potential for moving the clubhouse some meters, because at that point the clubhouse was going to be moved and the coastal pathway was going to be in that space a little bit. So it might pay to look back at that and look at the previous approvals already given for site change, because there was, I think, an approval given for the building mass to be slightly in a different space. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
That was a request from the club at that point.
Yeah.
You can't remember, but we'll have a look.
Because at that point, because it was well before shovel-ready funding and all those kind of things, the coastal pathway and those changes, it was thought that the sort of 1 metre wide section of footpath that was outside the building wasn't going to be wide enough for the coastal pathway. The building was going to be slightly shifted when it got redone because we weren't going to be able to use any road corridor. Of course, we ended up using road corridor, the coastal pathway, but but there was a decision made, I think, to be able to enable the mass of the building to be moved slightly towards the area that they're talking about now. Yeah, I'm not very much, but yeah.
I think some of the buildings on the road, isn't it?
There's a small portion of the building, yeah.
Thanks. Tim?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Firstly, the chicken and egg with resource consents and consenting, etc. The number one first step is to get agreement or approval from this board. That's the number one step, isn't it? So, because the chicken and egg, the resource consents, both from ECAN and ourselves, and then you've got building consents, that's a mirrored, and we'll leave that alone. But the first step for the club is to approach yourselves and us to get approval to go forward. Is that correct?
Yeah, technically two different acts and two different rules. So they can be ran concurrently. They can be one in front of the other. The recommendation is we don't advise clubs to spend the money going through a resource consenting process without having landowner, aka the board approval before doing it. That is just our recommendation to the majority.
And anyone would be a fool to.
Or we have situations where they get their consent without telling us.
Yeah.
And then there's a sort of, they expect to get the consent for it because they've got the resource consent. So it's a difficult one.
Yeah, but
it's better this way.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is our recommended part.
The clarity is that if we said no, there's no point doing anything. So if we say yes, then they've got a step forward. You've all got a step to move forward. So I just wanted to clarify that. The second one is if you look at the third slide, you can talk to the club about it because Mr. Williams just mentioned about it, or it might have been Brian, with regards to in the future because of sea level rise, the main building when it is next one along. Sorry, JJ. Yeah, that's it. So at some point when the clubhouse is looked at, it will be a single story. So if there are concerns from the public, and this is for you guys to talk with the club about, I'm just not making any suggestions, it may be that the actual existing club will be lower, and so that large white wall, which is blinking out a lot of the view for it, may be improved, but there may be a pro bono there with the club and the community. So I'll just leave that with you guys, but I just wanted to clarify that step forward.
Yeah, and I think, thank you, Tim. We have discussed that matter with the club, and obviously they're not at a stage now where they can make a clear determination of what they're doing, but the direction we have had from the club, and Tim, if I'm speaking out of line here, is that the intention at this stage is to stay within the footprint and definitely not go higher, but a possibility maybe of going lower, but that is not confirmed and we can't table that. That is just the intent at this stage from the current members that I've spoken to.
Lee?
I suppose just really wanted to clarify the level of engagement. I presume this will be an open engagement because we want to get that local lens as well as maybe, because these members aren't going to be, they're going to be coming from all over the city in terms of the yacht club. So just making sure we've got that wider engagement. So it will be an open engagement in terms of.
What the engagement team have prepared a plan. What do you mean by open?
It'll be fully an open engagement. So any resident in Christchurch can.
It'll be made available on the website, on the Let's
Yeah.
Talk, and it'll be signage. There will be obviously more targeted local, as there is with anything like this, but it will be open to the public. There is no way we're ring fencing it, and we can double check that and confirm that with our engagement. But I do think it's a good point, and my understanding is yes, that is the.
We're doing the normal, solid engagement process.
Yeah,
we recognise that this
broad
one.
perspective is what I'm.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Just a question from me and then Sarah. So obviously that the council engagement process is the main forum for the community to have their say, and if they've got concerns, to raise those concerns and present, if they're opposed at the end of the day, present that view to the board. There's after the landlord, the board makes a decision. Would there be further opportunity for that to be relitigated through resource consent process or anything like that, or is the resource consent process just between the council and the applicant?
Thank you. Yeah, the resource consent process, yes, is a separate process, and you can appeal that or ask for judicial review.
Okay.
So, for example, if it was notified to those neighbours and was determined under Section 95 that it was worthy of that. And the neighbours were not happy with the decision from the planning commissioner. Then that could be legally challenged under the RMA. Yeah, so there is an ability for it to end up being litigated through the RMA process as well as this. So it's two pieces of legislation. Certain things can be looked at. There is a little bit of overlap, admittedly, because the issues raised by the community, I'd imagine, will be the same through this process as it will be the RMA process, but there is a clear pathway under the RMA to appeal. And that is a risk that obviously that any developer or club or likewise.
Gosh, it was a complicated process, isn't it? Yeah. Sarah.
Just kind of tangential. There's some comment in the documentation we've got around the use of the car park site for rigging and those kind of things. Is that supposed to be fully an exclusive? And if so, is it possible for them to put a health and safety sign up rather than just the please don't come in, to like in current situations, just to stop people coming through?
So I'll speak to it briefly, but the club may have wished to ask if that's all right through the chair. The area that you can see on the right-hand side of their building there, which is kind of almost a rectangle, that is within their lease area, and that is the traditional rigging area. But during club days, that rigging does also sprawl out into the public land, being the yacht club car park, which is council.
But people can still go into the car park area, just in theory, not onto the other space.
In theory, yes, but obviously because it's not fenced, there is a low rope barrier. But during those days, it's open. So yes, there is definitely. We've talked about additional signage, but through the chair, is it all right if the?
Yes. Yep.
What?
Yes. Yeah. I'm happy to sum up if you like afterwards. Yeah. Would you like to? Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
So
at the end.
Could I just clarify what you were getting at there?
I was just trying to clarify which bits were still open for public and which bits should be exclusive and things, especially during club days and stuff.
So, and you would suggest additional signage to clarify that?
I was just checking on just to make sure that we had enough stuff in place for health and safety and those kind of things, because it talks about health and safety as a concern, booms flying around and those kind of things on when people are rigging. So, yeah.
And that's the club. It's key for the club to manage that risk naturally, but us as landowners also have a responsibility to the public. So
but people are allowed to access the car park, but they're allowed to stop non-club members driving on, if you like. It's just
and legally along that exclusive use boundary, once they go out of the car park, then the club can legally, my understanding, say sorry, this is you're on an exclusive use area and it preclude public, but yes.
And equally, they've got an obligation to manage it,
Okay.
Did that answer your question, Sarah? Okay, cool. All right. Any other questions? No. Well, thank you very much for your time. Cheers. Appreciate it.
So you're happy and clear about where it's going from here?
Yep. Yeah, no, it was very, it was very well presented. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep. Stand by.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Yeah, were you going to present that or just? Yeah, sweet. Well, we might just break for a few minutes. Yeah. Might just I will adjourn the meeting for a couple of minutes. All right, we're ready to go. No, no. Oh, sorry, Brian, were you waiting to speak? Oh, sure, yeah. Waiting for Kieran anyway.
We're very much on board. Very much on board with what Sarah is saying about the car park. Health and safety, as we all know, is a big driver these days, and we're very conscious of it. We've got boats with booms flailing around and people walking around, rigging boats, and where the prime attention goes there. So we're targeting at easing the pressure in the car park. Now, CYC has exclusive use of that car park on race days with cars. Other people have access to it, can launch their boats, but CCC have determined that they should take their cars and trailers away. It's very tight. Now, that's very hard to enforce, and we don't want to fall out with neighbours and everybody else. So we share it. But there is that issue. So we're aiming at releasing the pressure on that side. Common sense tells us, move over to the other side where there is a facility there. That is a big contribution towards health and safety, and it just eases the pressure. It's a logical thing to utilise land within our title. So that's virtually about it.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. No, I appreciate it.
Chairman, let's leave it at that, and thank you for the opportunity to present this on behalf of the Christchurch Yacht Club. Thank
Brian.
you all.
Cheers. Are we still waiting for Will? I think we can reconvene for next report. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, cool. All right. We'll reconvene for the report on connecting with young residents and community issues. So Jess is unfortunately sick today, but yeah, Jojo's going to present. Thanks.
Okay,
Go for
thanks,
it.
Callum. Yeah, this responds to the discussion between the board and the governance team around looking at options for how the board can better engage with young people in the area. So I'll just take you through a few slides around how the team have looked at how we might be able to take this forward. So just this first piece here, this actually refers back to the board's plan. So participatory democracy, and under that, the point around there around investigating, establishing a youth council. So there's some kind of link back here to the board's direction. So just to kind of take a moment to reflect on what those discussions with the board have directed in this space, the kind of why. So it's about understanding youth voice in the area, what matters to young people, gap in understanding of youth priorities, how do youth feel about the key issues affecting their lives, and how can we gather meaningful feedback, and what are some of the most effective ways to connect with young people. So we've had a discussion with the governance team and also talked to some of the community development people in the Metro team that focus on youth there. So we've got some of the pieces to talk through there. So we wanted to put this forward as a starting point, some of the first steps. So what we propose is an initial hui to kind of get this moving. If we can do this before the end of the year, so we're looking at possibly next month, thinking that this would be a kind of starting point, a smaller discussion to kind of get things kind of moving. Perhaps a few of the board members, depending on how many people we can draw in from existing kind of contacts. We wouldn't want to kind of imbalance the kind of turnout. And given that this is a starting point, some of the feedback from the Metro team was that it is really difficult to get young people and to draw them out. You know, if we just had put a kind of message out, a notice out. So we think that in the starting point, we'd approach existing contacts through leadership networks and schools and through some of the organisations that the community development advisors work with. We've put in here a kind of focus around the kind of more high school age children. Obviously, there's a kind of question about the definition of youth, but there can obviously be some challenges between having, you know, anywhere from a 24, 25-year-old in a room with a 13-year-old and just trying to find that balance. So our thinking around this was that it kind of fills the gap of those who can't vote and gives a kind of a specific age range there. So what we were thinking about in terms of what this initial hui could look like, really kind of three parts. One part, the board kind of talking about who they are and what the board does, what the council does, almost in a way of improving some kind of civics education to the group, but also just giving a picture of what the council does, just to kind of scope the discussion, because often when we move into these discussions, people, you know, if you talk to a group of people, oh, what are some of your issues in the area, it could divert off into, you know, justice issues or education issues. So that's some thinking there, through to a bit of a workshop with the group around, and we could have some of the governance team and some staff from across the council who quite commonly work in the community, and just trying to understand what it's like to be a young person in the Waihoro era and what's important to them. And then perhaps kind of concluding off with how does this link back to the board and the council's priorities. So again, this is quite an initial kind of hui just to get this kind of moving. Then through into to take this forward into the next year, we have a few ideas of proposal to build on the initial hui, looking to do a further hui in 2025. That at that stage we could then open that up to a wider group and try for that kind of putting it out there and build on the people who come to the initial hui. Obviously, with moving into next year and where the board's at in the term, could be a bit of a reflective piece on the board's plan and what might be useful kind of going forward. Just a note there, talking to the Youth Development Advisor in Metro, they have plans for some outreach early in the new year with schools and youth organisations. So that's something that the board could look to connect in with. Again, perhaps feeding into something around April to say that interested in youth voice and linking that together. Then just a final point there, there's a possibility to look at, in addition to a hui next year, but perhaps some innovative ways of engagement. There was an example given around working with libraries and using some of the resources they have around kind of film, and whether you could go to a group of young people and ask them to kind of come up with something and then kind of bring it back more in a kind of fun way and use some of the resources of teams like libraries. So that's all to just kind of say it doesn't just need to be a meeting and bringing people along. There might be other ways to kind of engage. So that's a picture of how we kind of see we could take this kind of concept forward. Sorry, Sarah. And I guess really interested to open this up for discussion with the board, and probably just to kind of respond that whether, you know, going back to the board's plan, the idea of a youth council, you'll see from this, it adds a bit more flex. We hadn't, from our discussions and talking to the Metro team, the actual establishing the structures of a more formalized group may not be as fruitful as kind of having more regular engagement and bringing young people together. So I might stop there.
Thanks. Lee and Keir and then Tim.
Just on that school vein, We used to meet with our local cluster quite often, and I'm just wondering, with a view to that student council, one of the main pieces of work we do each year is the annual plan or review, and it'd be really great to try and, whether it's a student council or engaging certainly with our high schools in our area, and seeing if we can get a cluster of school reps to help us in our submission to make sure we've got that lens. Quite often with this, with the student councils, they haven't had focus or a directive. So if we did give them a directive, I think it might help with structure and kind of give them a brief. So that's
like
just
that
my
idea.
thoughts, that we, again, if we can get in front of the schools and cluster when we can, and see if we can sound that with the principals to see if they'd be prepared to put 1 or 2 members forward for each high school, and see if it's just sound it at this time.
What that idea? Kia, sorry.
Yeah, so I suppose I have a couple of questions first and then some feedback. The first big question is, do staff have resource capacity to deliver this on top of existing commitments? Or will something have to be shifted?
Hot seat, JJ.
I know, if you don't have that right now, that's okay. I mean, but I think that's probably-
Sure. I think the simple answer would be, the extent to which, I mean, we've kind of given a picture. I think the initial hui, and as we've pointed to, going to existing people, existing contacts to get things moving, that's a picture of what we believe we could achieve in that space.
One of the challenges with youth engagement is that you often engage with youth who are already engaged, and I'm reluctant to end up in a space where we hear from, and bless their souls, but the brightest children at Cashmere High, because they are already people who can talk to us. And if there's a trade-off between some of the other engagement work, where we might be reaching into communities that we don't have as good a track record of talking to, I think we need to tread carefully here, because this is, there's fish hooks. I guess my other question would be is, what do we, and this is the feedback piece, I guess, is I don't really care if we ask people what they want and they tell us about things that are central government, or as a starting point, I guess, like, that's okay. That doesn't bother me. If they kind of say, actually, we don't really care too much about some of the stuff you do, like, that's fine. Like, they don't have to be interested in us, and they may, I would actually prefer to be as open in terms of what that conversation is to start with. And then that probably also gives us some idea about the priorities that we're working in. So I would prefer if we gave them the blank bit of paper, and then at the end said to them, well, cool, you've mentioned, you want to do, drug law reform and, climate change and skate parks. Well, we can help you with climate change and skate parks in these ways, rather than, if that makes sense. So I guess I'm kind of more interested in a really open, that initial hui being really open, rather than going out and saying, here's what we do, saying, well, you tell us what you care about, and then we'll tell you how we can help you with what you care about. Because I do think there's a bit of a danger if we just get them in and say, hey, we do roads, rats, and rubbish. And that seems to be a bit closing it down. So that's, yeah. So I guess my 2 things, like resourcing and are we cutting off other engagement, and what are the trade-offs? And then, yeah, like, I think the more open, the better.
Tim?
Two simple, kind of along the lines of what Kia's been saying. I don't like the term youth council in the community board area. I prefer youth, like we want to connect with all, because if you get a youth council, they're elected by each other, the same group, and we're going to have them for a year or 18, whatever it is. I think it's kind of killing it for me. Then the other one is, I do think as we mature as connecting with this group, that we do kind of help, however we do it, to understand there is a difference between community boards and what we do, and council and the conduit that we are, etc. So I do think that's important, but it's not essential, because like Kia was saying, it's better to get all the information, and it may not even be ours, but at least we know it and we can work with it and work forward. That's it.
Roy? And then Sarah, and then...
Yeah, and I guess like leading into something that you were saying, Lee, that's something that, you know, we can gather some information and put it into something, yeah, long-term plan or the plan ahead. And the young people knowing that what they're saying is going to be used for something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, Sarah, and then Mel.
Okay, thanks. I just in that initial Hui space, I do like the idea of letting them know the types of things that we do, but saying don't limit yourself maybe to just what you think or the few things that we've said, because there'll be more things. But just when we do, I think that taking it away from necessarily council framing. So we have different departments and those kind of things, and they're not very helpful for actually describing what those areas do. And just putting it in, you know, plain language, and, you know, not talking about transport and traffic, but talking about, you know, travel and roads, cycleways, those kind of things. It's how we get about the city. And adding in climate change, the community support we do, the grant funding for all those different community groups that we support. I mean, these kids will probably have no idea actually the number of community groups that there are in the city too. It's more that kind of civic space, not necessarily council space, and we help enable that civic space. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. Mel?
First, I was just wondering with the civics aspect, I think that's quite useful at a board level. And I was just wondering if the Metro team will be able to help you or whoever is presenting that. Because obviously they'll have a plan of how they're going to present it, and they probably have done it before. From what Keir said about having youth talk about anything that they have an interest in, I agree with that, because that's what the age-friendly group do. Sort of talking about two different age groups, and then we advocate on their behalf potentially or whatever. So I think there is good to see all their interests, and that'll only be a very small snapshot. But probably will be a good indicator of what a broader range of youth are interested in, I would imagine. Regarding your comment about seeing or interacting with youth who are engaged, in actual fact, I feel like we don't interact with any youth apart from giving out some money. And then we do things like basketball courts and stuff, which is actually interacting with a different type of group of young person than what you're referring to. And I do think there is personally a space for interacting with all types of students, having them involved. Where this all came from, because we did have a youth community board at one stage, and those people in that are people like Daniel Hay and Caitlin White and Isabella, who went off to UC, and I saw her whenever I talked to you about it now a few months ago, and she said she was reminiscing about how when she was on it, how fantastic it was, which is what got me to talk to JJ and Jess about sort of doing this stuff that's in our plan. So it has a long-term effect on whoever is involved. I'm really keen for this to progress and just to see what it comes out with. And then the other thing I was thinking is that from that youth community board that we had, but was under-resourced, and took the idea and formed the Haratuni Youth Council in Hillsville, which is still going now, and she's gone, you know, and Andre goes to that. So I think there is a space for this sort of thing, and I've never been to that, but this one I'm really keen on it, and having young people connected to us, because they are, but then they aren't, and I don't think they really do understand what council do. Even those in the youth council don't really, I don't think, because we don't see them either. So you know, so I'd love to see this as connecting with as many people as possible, and if there are some that are interested in governance stuff or how council works, and that's, I think that's great to foster that. Yeah.
Lots of different thoughts. I'm not quite sure. I think around like where we'd like to focus. I think like this board, I think we do interact reasonably well with some groups of youth. Like we've had at the Cornelius O'Connor Reserve, that group of young people coming in. That was, you know, due to a relationship between a youth worker and the board, but it was still really driven, you know, like that was a fantastic thing to happen. And the other example I'm thinking of is the Cashmere High group that was wanting funding for that pontoon bridge thing with the screws. You know, that's I guess a kind of another group of kids who kind of took leadership and came to the board. I think that I would hope that if what we're trying to do is, I guess, engage with young people who are already young leaders, that actually they can lead that. But with some support, I don't think I would like to think that, you know, like the engagement that we have with like maybe if it was like you know, a group of student councillors from schools across the area, that actually, you know, that group of people has, you know, often they'll have teacher support to run some sort of, you know, like program within the school, and we can kind of put ourselves on the map and say, as a board, we're available if you'd like to come and meet with us and talk about what we do, or, you know, have some you know, similar to like the principal's breakfast. You know, it could be as light as that. But I could imagine a lot of value coming out of that without having to sink a huge amount of staff resource into that. And then in terms of engaging with other groups that work with youth, like, you know, Crossover or some of our other youth, you know, I've got many different youth groups, yeah, Fuse, etc. That, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'll have much better ideas than I've got in my head at the moment. So yeah, I'm excited by the idea of talking with groups like that. But yeah, I am also conscious that we do want to make sure that it is a really good use of staff resource, which is we don't have much to spare. Yeah.
Because Tyler has a youth portfolio and he has a staff member that's been created to support his role. And I know he's got ideas in board space, but hasn't really done anything. So might be worth connecting with him, and I can't remember the lady's name. Do you remember that young? Anyway, there's a person who works in this and
Cool. Rugby league then. Roy?
Yeah. Also, yeah, I think there are a lot of young people that are passionate about it because, you know, in the schools, there's a committee for this, committee for that, and this, and the school council as well. But yeah, if they're wanting to take it to the next level, it would be good to, you know, for them to have the opportunity to, be involved in if they wanted to, because yeah.
So we have connected in with Danielle. That's who we've connected with the Metro team. So that's a good connection. I was just going to mention, Callum, the board has its presentation to the council next week. So we'll be preparing the presentation for that. So if you want to make a note in that to inform the wider council that the board is looking at this, to just make that connection. I guess it doesn't have to be a request, but to just
put it on the map.
Put that out there.
Yeah, that sounds a good idea.
So that's perhaps a way that we can make a step forward and just get that so that it's visible for the wider council that this board's doing that work. We can connect back in through the resource. Just a couple of comments, just on the kind of scoping and central government. I guess our thinking was just that we don't want to set ourselves up for a space where we can't kind of do anything, but also kind of take that point care that you do want to have a blank page as well, and let, you know, thoughts evolve. That probably connects back to the discussion we did have with Danielle, and the Coastal Burwood Linwood board is looking at doing something similar in the space, and she shared some of the experiences there where essentially it's that question of what are we asking of young people? So we could get them in, but are we asking them what do they think, or are we connecting it to the community board's priorities? So are we taking something to them, or are we wanting to bring something back from them, and where does it kind of gel together? And I think, Lee, you kind of mentioned where did we go to schools and see what their priorities are? But that was really one of the discussions around, it's a bit chicken and egg. Are we taking the board's work? Are we looking at what's coming up in the board's agenda, what's coming through the board to young people and kind of testing that? Or are we asking young people what they think and then trying to fit that into the board's kind of priorities? But that seems to be kind of a challenge. And I think as part of this, we'd need to be thinking about, what are we asking of young people? And yeah, and where does it go to next? And that was probably one of the reflections from Danielle, was that through the coastal team's work, that they look to their board plan as that piece, because otherwise it just kind of is a discussion, and then what does it link back to? So that's something we'd have to think, which is why we kind of framed it in that way of having like a broader discussion, then trying to think, does this align with the work of the board or of the council, and can we find those bits where we could connect, or do we kind of help to connect in other ways, beyond us? But
Roy? No,
Yeah,
finish
I guess, yeah, this is good because all you're wanting to do is initially get them in and then kind of, slowly build that relationship for the next year. And I think it is a bit of a process, but step by step. But one thing we should do is budget for food, like,
Yeah.
Remember it went to the training budget.
Yes. Sounds good. Yep. All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, we're going to move to elected members exchange. Sorry, JJ, was that everything you needed from that session? Cool. All right. We'll try and keep it brief just because it's almost 6. But is there anyone that wants to kick us off? Any burning issues to raise? Sarah?
Yeah, I just mentioned to Lee just before, and I'm following up through OCE, that new really nice development that's going up in Sumner on the corner that looks brilliant, which is great. On Sumner, you head into Sumner and there's the empty site there with the apartments being built, which is great. But I've just and I'm assuming it's related, but we're not quite sure yet. Just checking. But you know how you come in down Esplanade and there's a whole pile of diagonal parking that people use for going to the beach and stuff in Sumner. It's currently being water blasted off and yellow lines being put in. And I don't know if you guys know how busy that car parking is over summer, and the businesses and homes and stuff there too. So we're trying to work out because we haven't made a decision on that. So we're assuming it's temporary traffic management, but it's clearly there for a while if they're getting rid of all the parking and actually just putting yellow lines in. So some concerned residents and business owners.
What? Yeah.
Yes.
So have you got an open action around that?
Yeah. So I was notified of it yesterday by a resident who notified me and said they're doing more of it today. So I'd sent a thing through to OCE yesterday, and I went and saw them in person this afternoon and said, listen, please just.
What?
So the residents didn't know it was happening. So I don't know if it might be that they're using that as the main entrance exits area for the site, but not sure.
Okay. No, thanks, Sarah.
Just that, could you keep?
Yeah,
No,
just keep us just.
Tell him this is a chair, that's all, because he's,
On, yeah.
You need me.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yep. Oh yeah, that's right. That was what I was trying to remember. Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Mel. Yeah, went to the corrections hui with the community around the process for notifying the community for when offenders are placed back in the community. I think it was obviously this was spurred by the death of Juliana and the subsequent report, which advised changes to their processes. Corrections were very, very reticent to mention anything related to any particular case. So I think that there was probably a bit of a sense of dissatisfaction from the community because they hadn't had that specific incident addressed, which is probably what some people understandably gone there to talk about. And obviously, understandably, corrections were unable to talk about. But on the whole, corrections did a really good job of explaining in detail the processes that they gone through, the changes that have been made as a result of the report, and generally answering questions from the group. So that was really appreciated, at least by me, and I'm sure many others. Yeah, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Mel.
Yeah, so I asked Alan last night because it was
Yeah.
A&A, and
Yeah.
he actually thought it was really good.
Good. Okay.
And he was the one that sent in most of those specific questions,
Yeah.
I think, and he was happy with it, sort of, because the notifications because our board has never had a notification as far as I know, but they have around the rest of the city, but they're very rare. Like there's only this very, like, what was it? Six
No.
in the like one every year across the city.
It was
or
like
something.
12 in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, it was hardly anything. So
Yeah.
we've never had anyone in this area placed.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was good was just that they commented on was about the Salvation Army, because the Salvation Army turned up and they explained about the types of people they take in, and they have quite strict criteria about who is allowed and who isn't. And because they often get blamed, it's the people that live there that causing people trouble. And actually, Alan commented on it as well. He was really pleased to have that information, and they'll put it into the Addington Times for people to be able to read. ANA as well, Vicky Southworth from ECAN, the regional councillor, and ECAN staff member spoke about the regional public transport plan, which made me do a submission last night. And it was actually really good, but it went on for ages, but very, the main stuff that they're doing is pets on buses and carriers, and also you'll be able to use a bank card eventually, although you have to sign up what bank card you're using, and you'll be able to use it on a bus. You won't need a Metro card anymore, and then eventually you'll be able to do it around the whole country. It was really good. So should do a submission. Oh, right. Oh, that's cool. Age friendly, so they have what happened last meeting, which was 2 weeks ago. They Laura, who's the contractor working, had found out about these surveys that have been done in Napier City Council and somewhere else in Holland, this place in Holland or something, will take all the data from the survey and spit out what it all means, which is fantastic. So there's a survey out now. I've shared it already. I presume we were allowed to do that. So I've shared it. And we want as many people in our area. So for people who are connected, if you can put it into residence groups things across that side, because I've sort of done this bit, to get as many people over 65 to actually do the survey. And it'll sort of be a starting point for issues to look at and be quite good. So
excellent.
just that. And then for Hohenay Community Association, they've got a spring market on Sunday if you want to go. And Whariora have a 30-year celebration. I don't know if you guys got that email about that on Sunday morning. And Whariora also have an AGM on the 10th of October coming up as well.
Thanks, Mel. Anyone else?
Just give a quick plug for the Celebrate Summerfield event on.
Oh,
it's
yes.
gonna happen
Yeah.
on Saturday,
Planning to come to
so
that.
I think the board has supported that nominally, so I'll try and attend that if I can.
I'm a guest speaker.
Oh, wow.
What time?
All right.
Definitely going now.
Okay, I'll go at, I'll go at 2.
Did we not? Didn't we fund them enough?
Sorry, I'll just mention as well, staff did a Zoom meeting about the South Library on Monday. And just again, the board obviously had a presentation of probably 4 or 5 weeks ago,
Yeah.
so it's obviously moved on a little bit since then. I did ask a question around sustainability and certainly the inclusion of solar panels. So we are expecting a memo, or I've been told there will be a memo just to run through that business case that will be shared with the board. So I'm not sure if that can be an inclusion or it might be an option, but that's what I'm hoping, that we've got a little bit of information around a business case on that.
Thanks.
Cool.
Alrighty, no one else?
Ferrymead reopening Sunday.
Oh, yep.
Plug for that, and looking forward to that. See what Jared and the team have got up to. There've been a few concerned residents about what might have been happening. Hopefully their minds will be at ease. No, not in my lead box. No, just okay. Yeah, but yeah, it'd be good.
Cool.
Good to go and
Cheers.
report back on
Sounds
it
good.
next time.
Thanks,
Oh,
Will.
and that bus stop. I can see it now, Sarah. The hidden bus stop on Ferry
Oh,
Road.
the one that was.
So they've trimmed back, yeah, whether or not it's a safe place for a pedestrian to go to. Yeah. No, not on that side of the road. Yeah. And it's busy.
All right. No other members' updates? Excellent. We'll move to Karakia Whakamitsunga. Oh, yes. Here we go. Right. That's the bottom. Oh no, that's. Yeah, it's the bottom one. All right, me karakia tātou. Tukuna te wairua kia rere ki te taumata, ko te mata tika, te mata pono, kei arahi I ngā mahi, ka arotahi te tira kia eke panuku, kia eke tangaroa, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e.